After all this, you still...
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
Now, you know it's bad when white people late.
Well, to be fair, I was just on the road, but
No, you're
yes.
good. You're good. Oh my gosh. So we want to jump straight into it, or we want to loosen things up. How do we want to proceed with this, gang?
I say we should just jump straight into it, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I've got limited time. I mean, obviously, you guys can continue the conversation well after I'm gone, and even feel free to contradict anything I say. But
well,
I've got bombs to throw.
I don't think we can contradict anything you say harder than the Democrats have contradicted themselves for the past 4 years at this point. And the only overall welcome back, dear listeners. You know why we're doing this. You should be surprised. It's record time for us to finally respond to a world event. We're still late on the podcast front by like 1 day, but I mean, everything we've been talking about.
Hey, at least we didn't actively contribute. At least we didn't actively contribute to the exact same things that we're talking about today, unlike some other podcast.
No, that's oh my god, that's a whole scandal going back there. But it's again, it's like everything we've been talking about on the show, everything we've been sounding the alarm on for the past 4 years has come to pass, and I think the response I was prepared to have before the results came out was, okay, the left has been thoroughly defeated by the Democratic Party. They don't need... They're trying to prove the point that they can do this on their own. And I was fully prepared for a reality where Kamala Harris wins and the Democrats will learn nothing. The equally bad option was always on the table, and that's what we got. And needless to say, I think the prediction I had a couple episodes back was, did Joe Biden's debate performance successfully scare the Democrats back into being competent? And the long and short answer is no, it did not work. They are as incompetent as ever, and they blew it the hardest they've ever blown it, I think. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, I mean, not to, spare the Democratic Party just criticism, right? But I honestly think, maybe one of the more disturbing aspects of this, looking at the election results overall, seeing, and just up, and not exactly up and down the ballot, but certainly at the top, I think we're fundamentally seeing that we truly do live in a post-truth reality. When you look at the exit polls, you see the issues that motivated voters compared to the reality of where those issues are. There's blatant contradictions. I think we could probably safely say that presidential campaigns do not matter much at all. And, to the extent that, maybe this one did matter at all, it was, in the sense that it failed to turn out voters, that they can't necessarily win without... I don't know what definitionally the left is, but also, I mean, frankly, Trump is, you look at the results, he is the most popular Republican in the country. He is favored,
the first Republican to win the popular vote since Reagan, right?
No, Bush in his second term won.
Okay.
Popular vote. But yeah, I mean, still, like, one of the first Republicans to win the popular vote in like 30 years. You see these results, and I think that, fundamentally there's, we have, I think, a conflict not just within the Democratic Party or the liberal left tumorous, cancerous space that we, I guess nominally cohabitate with. And the fact that I think 70 million people in this country, I know he won technically by a slightly larger margin. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to a small fraction of those folks. But 70 million people in this country, I think we're going to have to actively fight and scrape by against for the foreseeable future. Because I don't think fundamentally they are persuadable in any tangible way.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think that's just sort of the grim reality that we're in.
John, Sky, do y'all want to weigh in?
Yeah, I entirely agree. I think that the idea that the Democrats or the strategy they had in like kind of appealing towards like the center right, trying to pull away voter for Trump was ultimately just pretty stupid. Because Republicans are going to vote Republican, right? There's like a huge like I feel like they act more as a like united party, as a like sort of united front, even though there were like
Hive mind,
schisms.
if you will.
Right, like even with the schisms, like because there were more moderate like anti-Trump Republicans versus your anti-establishment pro-Trump Republicans, right? But even then, you're not gonna peel away at that centrist group and have them vote Democrat. Like they're just not going to. It's just party over everything. So
I,
I
I
think
mean,
the
like to that point, right? Like, I know a lot of conventional poli sci rules are getting broken by the day, but the old adage of like tailism doesn't work. If you're gonna be a fake conservative, they're just gonna choose the real one at the end of the day. That seemed to have held true in this case as well.
Exactly, and I think the Democrats definitely should have made more concessions to like progressive voters. They should have took a stronger stance on Israel. They should have talked more about like capping medication costs. They should have talked about rent. They had a lot of there's a lot of avenues. There's a lot of progressive measures that are widely popular that they just chose not to run on. Essentially, I think that's
I'm
that's why they lost.
The real question is like, what did they run on? Because like I don't know what campaign promises that she made for the people other than saying that we're gonna have the most lethal army ever. So like I truly don't know why should I vote for her if all she's saying is we're going to have more military and she's not saying, and then she kept bringing up the middle class. We're not the middle class, you guys. She's
Right.
not talking about us.
I
She
love
wasn't
the
talking about us.
I love the I'm a small business. We're all small businesses. Like that's gonna like really speak to the working class.
It's like, nigga, I can't afford a business. I can't
right.
afford a life. The fuck? Like, why are you focused on like a war that's not actually a war, it's a genocide? And like why would people vote for her other than being scared? And like I'm still scared if I vote for you because you're talking about having a lethal ass military. I don't like that. That's
Well,
bad actively.
sure, and I think that there were policies on affordable housing and things like that, but I think they
Oh,
weren't highlighted
were
enough
they
by the campaign.
policies?
That's
Like I don't
yeah.
know that she actually had policies. I think she said that would be cool. And then like didn't say, I'm gonna do this. This is how like we
No,
joke
there
about
there
Trump
there was
having
some of that, but I
a
think that
concept
again,
of a
it's
plan, but she had a concept of a plan. She did not have a plan.
I mean, whether it was a feasible plan to actually, get into policy, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think that was so much related to that. But there was like, concrete policy ideas. The thing is, it's that I think a lot of that was obscured behind kind of these like weird centristy vibes, right? Like I think, they weren't talking about policies when they had Liz Cheney on the campaign trail with them, but I think it just fundamentally disgusted so many people on the left. And I was, I'll admit I was wrong to thinking that had any potential ties to any, the idea of like the never Trump vote just doesn't exist, right? I mean, 94% of Republicans, even after January 6th, even after garbage, every, like the Madison Square, garden Nazi rally. Like fundamentally, like there's the myth of a quote unquote good Republican is dead. And it was probably foolish to run that strategy in the first place. I just thought that maybe there was a few you could shave off, but I mean, like you said, I think that there was just a lack of um good campaign in terms of highlighting those policies. Like it shouldn't necessarily be your responsibility to go through the website and research, every single, corner and stuff like that. But I think, when they're just not campaigning on it in a way that is inherently grabbing your attention anyways.
Yeah,
I
it
w-
was this vapid, almost appeal to like moderation and sanity, but it fell flat. So the
Well, and
biggest go ahead.
there was one other thing I was thinking too, because I had forgotten about it in a second for what Sky was talking about with the middle class. I think that's like something that's fundamentally changed in American politics is the idea of who is the middle class. I think 3, 4 years ago, people, I think for a long time, people would not have said, I'm not middle class, I'm below it. Right. But I think increasingly, especially like our generation, is sort of identifying as not middle class because we are barred from so many of the economic
Mhm.
opportunities that boomers, Gen X, the ones that tended to vote, for Republicans, enjoyed.
Yeah, and it's almost safe to say at this point that like what constitutes the real voting public at this point and the people who get to have a say or are the ones whose vote is sought actively are homeowners at this point. And it's different camps of homeowners and their own brands of selfish response to their own precarity that I think motivate a lot of what we've seen this cycle. To that end as well, like there just wasn't enough daylight between the Democrats and the Republicans in this rightward shift we've seen over the last 4 years. Of course, there is on some areas, but the biggest example of that to me was the vice presidential debate with Waltz against Vance, right? Where Waltz is trying to say at every point, like the Republicans are coming for you with guns, and then saying, "But I agree with JD Vance on pretty much everything."
Yeah.
I don't know how they expect that to land anywhere.
Well, and some of it is like that JD Vance, like a lot of the stuff he's agreeing with him on are like inherent lies. But like
Yeah.
that's like if you're sort of just conceding that, like, oh yeah, like this faux populism is as good enough as like the real deal,
Hmm.
then we're in trouble.
Exactly. So I think one of the big angles we had, because I don't have an outline, I'm just going off of the internal discussions we've had in our Discord. I think that's good enough. I think the big thing we can start with is that many Democratic Party apparatchiks, whether it's the Pod Save America guys, whether it's Kamala's own staff, Biden's own staff, donors, uh, oh,
just to have you seen like what Kamala's like Twitter or social media staff look like?
What they look like?
Like physically look like,
they were
Yeah,
or
all
like
like
the
white Gen Z, right? Like,
demographic of them. They
uh,
were majority white men, then white women, and then the three people of color they had was a black woman, an Asian East Asian woman, and a South Asian woman.
well, so I want to say I have a problem with that, not because of maybe necessarily the optics that you're talking about, but I have a problem with it from the fact that like those groups were fundamentally lost to this cycle, which points to the idea that again, like the idea it's like, oh well, like we're not trying, they're not trying to speak to white men, and that's why we lose or whatever, or white women, and that's why they're going to Republicans. How is a staff entirely based around those demographics not coming up with a cohesive message or strategy to win those groups, if those are supposedly the groups that kind of matter the most for like these winning back the country or whatever?
I feel like what it is like there's like this inherent myth that like Democrats just generally believe that they just have the minority vote, right? Like it's like they don't really have to like try to appeal to, and they didn't really, and you can see that they lost like the majority Latino vote. I feel like they're just not really appealing to minority and more marginalized people just because they just assume that they just their vote is just assumed.
Well, I don't think it's just that. I think part of it is that the strategies that they believed those votes were assumed in are just not the case, right? I mean, we've complained about the rightward shift on immigration, and
mhm.
I think fundamentally, I mean, you see like the policies. I mean, we're seeing a little bit of regret from some Latino voters who are like, oh shit, my husband's gonna get deported. I guess I'll be able to better afford eggs, but where's the money gonna come from now? But for the most part, I mean, like we're seeing like there's deep divides in particularly like the Latino community. It's not a monolith. It really kind of depends on, in some cases, country of origin. Cubans obviously is kind of this a group that I think, far too frequently make awkward concessions to, that have, I think, destroyed national politics in a lot of ways. But I think other groups, like, I mean, fundamentally, it's like, I think trying to appeal to those groups as a group identity, like through whether it's identity politics or whatever, I think that's not the way forward to get back those votes.
You're onto something there where it's like the framework, the liberal framework for identity politics has been fraught for quite some time, and you could argue that the Obama era framework for identity was always itself kind of a Potemkin thing. But then trying to graft it onto Hillary, graft it onto Biden, graft it onto Kamala, as the Democrats have been moving in lockstep towards the right with the Republicans, has presented several fractures across many areas. And I think another component to this that we've commented on, and I think we should try to link them in this discussion, is that, you know, precarity seems to be a recurring feature in American life, even among people who we'd consider more affluent. There is this perceived sense of precarity, even if it may not seem direct. And sometimes it's about things that seem more mundane, like the access to consumer goods that they may not necessarily need. So you, at the same time, you combine that with real precarity that poor people, working class people, and the downwardly mobile, I'll come up with that as a category, right? Face daily, right? And I think you combine that with the hyper individualism and alienation of American life, along with just how the internet has been wholesale bought by the right at this point, right? That I think a lot of this social spiritual crisis at the heart of the American mind um has just led to this explosion of right-wing, individualistic, contradictory responses to the Democratic Party's and like the liberal establishment's conception of identity. And you're seeing it break down in all kinds of incoherent and backwards ways across demographics. It's, you know, not just in minority communities, because we've talked about that on the show a little bit, how like even in minority groups, like conservatism has its own weird flavors. Even in like mainstream white voting blocks, these discussions are kind of very pronounced, and they're very broadly painted with that anti-intellectual brush that we've been talking about, right? So there is a full breakdown of not just how we build consensus reality, but how we undergo social discourse that is in crisis, and we are observing that crisis be exploited by the right. Do they have a long-term strategy on how that exploitation is going to play out? I think that remains to be determined. To me, it looks more opportunistic, but we are living with the consequences of that right now. And I don't think liberals have the temerity or the framework to accept this, especially because they are responsible for enabling this to some extent. I'm just going to open that up for a response. I don't want to keep yapping.
I mean, I think, you know, that's like a lot of great points there and whatnot. And I think that, you know, we're primarily thinking of this from a presidential standpoint. But like, I mean, the reality is, I mean, you look, I mean, down ballot as well. I mean, it wasn't as bad, but it's still pretty bad, right? I mean, they're going to most
It
likely
was.
carry a government trifecta. I saw something from Senator Chris Murphy, who's been very critical of the Democratic Party in the wake of all of this, calling for kind of, you know, sort of an embrace of, you know, left populism and whatnot. And he mentions that, like, you know, like going forward, like what we've seen is, unless there's a radical reshift in the public and in the party, and probably really in the public too, which I think is like the scary part, right? Is that we don't really have a cordial solution to that. in certain ways, but it's like if it's looking like the ceiling that Democrats can expect in the Senate is like 52 seats, whereas Republicans can potentially get a supermajority of 62 at some point. Like, the filibuster is blocked at 60. Like, the Democrats are gonna have to fundamentally, and I think that's the thing too, is like not only do they have to sort of embrace some type of new messaging, they need to get like fundamentally serious about the way we look at the institutional framework of this country.
Yeah.
The way things are hamstrung with certain state divides, the Supreme Court, of course, gerrymandering, and the Electoral College, right? It didn't necessarily matter in this outcome, but like to the extent that I think it might have, is that like we can see the swing states are generally where the election was closer because that's where all the time was spent. And certain blue states started slipping and stuff like that. And I think that, one of the big downsides of the Electoral College is, beyond just, the fact that it's an inherently anti-democratic system, is that, for 4 years we've been hearing how Pennsylvania is the most important state in the country. Well, what does that mean? It means that we have to accept that fracking is like the most important like gift God has ever given mankind. It means all of these other like weird esoteric issues that no one else, the minute you like leave the state, gives a shit about. It has to be an important issue that we're all held hostage to.
Yeah.
And I think that that's like, like one of the things where even if like, yeah, like it doesn't seem like as big of an issue because, we lost the popular vote too. It's an issue because we are focusing on like just really, really fucking dumb shit, to be frank.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like focusing on really dumb shit is like something that the Republicans are really good at, which is another reason why they kind of won this race. Like I feel like a lot of the campaigning that they've done are issues that most people don't actually care about. They're just kind of made to care because of what's being put in front of them. I guess I'm wondering kind of what that would look like for the Democrats to actually put together a cohesive message, what that would be around, and how to make that convincing to get people out to vote.
This is going to be like super controversial, but honestly, like I think taking back the politics of hate, like hatred for the ruling class, your crazy uncle who spouts racist shit at Thanksgiving, your boss, maybe make it a little bit more personal on that level, right? That like you're getting cheated, stuff like that. I think leaning in on this because I think I think that on some level it's a language barrier. I mean, obviously, mostly English, but like it's a language barrier in terms of how we talk about these issues. And I think that like just kind of this hippy dippy bullshit. Here at the DNC, we've got the Coconut Coalition or whatever you want to call it. Consists of war criminals, the left, the far left, the centrist, the billionaire class. Like I mean, it's incohesive. And clearly, if it's a big tent, it's a big tent that has a ton of holes in it. And I think that's what they need to recognize.
I think you're making sense there with like this needlessly conciliatory practice of the liberal establishment, right? And I see it, trickle out into all sorts of things where it's like, even when we didn't have to be just on this podcast, right? Like, I feel like there were moments where I was a little too conciliatory or I was a little too patronizing to the Democrats when I should have been even more cruel, right? But to that end, right? It's like this expression of resentment is something that the Republicans have been thriving on for the past 4 years when the Democrats have kind of, they're best known for tone policing. They're best known for shutting down dissent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think flattening all dissent, whether it comes from the left or right, as like just inherently gross, right? People pick up on that. They've responded to it bizarrely, but people do pick up on that stuff. And I think like, down to the level of like, when Trump gets shot and all the Democrats are sitting there holding hands, praying over him, right? Like, it's a kind of mentality that like, aside from like people trying to fit into polite, like a very limited form of polite liberal society, most people were kind of like, "Oh, thank goodness he got shot." Not that like I'm condoning everyone should celebrate violence, but that's just how people are, you know. And it's to the point that again, you're being conciliatory with people. It doesn't matter. Like, why the Cheneys? Why the Cheneys of all people? Like, I can understand like getting a focus group of ex Trump voters or like some moderates to like, you know, speak on your behalf and endorse you, but just going the full extreme, and then like you said too, that we've seen the full repudiation of this idea of appealing to the quote unquote moderate or appealing to the anti-Trump Republican. That just does not exist. And I think, you know, the silence and absence of the people like the Lincoln Project is really speaking right now. That grift, I think, is going to continue for a few more years.
Oh,
but
I wish they were silent.
Oh no! Oh no!
Oh no! What are they saying?
They're just. I think they're just continuing to forward the fantasy that, like, you know, that they do exist, that they are like, you know, this real group, blah blah blah. That like, oh, we'll continue to like fight the resistance. I'm like, I didn't see these people do shit.
They didn't lift a goddamn finger.
You know, I mean, like 8 to 5 years ago, you know, when Trump was president the first time, these people weren't doing anything. You know, again, like, you know, you look at the votes being, you know, like, I mean, I highlight this in my dissertation on, you know, Trump's kind of purge of the party, and like, you know, Justin Amash, the term that he is the most like supportive of Trump's agenda is the term he voted to impeach him. Like it's not like and obviously he's gone anyways, but like, you know, like that's just like the sort of like the awkwardness behind all of this is that like, you know, like even people who sort of don't like his aesthetics, they still fundamentally like his policy. And at the end of the day, they'll vote for that policy rather than, you know, the aesthetics of like, oh, you know, like who cares about democracy and whatnot? Well, except, you know, it's a rigged game until it isn't, all of a sudden against, you know, their horrible interests, and all of that.
So we have been talking a bit for how we wish the Democrats would have responded or what they could have done to maybe prevent, if not respond better. Let's look at what is being said right now in that vein. So right now, I already got an email from the Harris campaign asking for additional money well after the votes have been counted. So
You know why that is?
Why?
Because they are alleged in $20 million in debt
No way.
from the campaign. Yes.
There's no possible way.
I know there's no possible way, but I do think that they might be in debt.
Meanwhile, Trump was using it as his personal money gun.
Yeah,
Trump was like, I'm printing money now, right now, bitch. I don't give a fuck about nothing but this money. And Harris is like, I got $1 billion and I still need more money.
No, they blew
even though everything's over.
Yeah, where did that money go? They rose it so quickly.
It went on YouTube.
It went to Liz Cheney. You think she did that out of the goodness of her heart? You think all of these people came out because of the goodness of their heart? No, they got paid. Beyonce got paid. Liz Cheney got paid. Everybody got paid. This was a money laundering scam. This is not an election.
Oh, so apparently this happened.
Trump has alleged that they're in debt, but
yeah, Trump is the one who alleged that there's the 20 million in debt. I'm looking at the Newsweek article.
I think, and I'm not saying that Trump is correct, but I do think they are partially in debt.
They had 120 million in the bank in mid-October.
Yeah, that was mid-October.
Yeah, how do you go through that kind of money in half a month?
Celebrities getting paid. Like, all of these like, I just want y'all to know, I'm a Beyonce fan. I don't agree with everything she does, obviously, But Beyonce doesn't get out of bed
Like
for a
extorting the
little.
Harris campaign,
Like, yeah,
supposedly.
she's literally she's not gonna just get out of bed for the goodness of her heart. She got paid. Everybody who was a part of this campaign got paid. That's
Okay,
why they did this. Not because they care about democracy, not because they were scared of Trump, not because they want to restore abortion rights. It's because they wanted to get a slice of the pie.
okay, so I'm just looking at the Hill first. So DNC official Lindy Lee called Vice President Harris's bid for the White House, quote, a $1 billion disaster. The truth is, this is just an end epic disaster. This is a $1 billion disaster, she said during her Saturday morning appearance on Fox and Friends Weekend. To that end, too, the New Republic has an article out. Harris raised $1 billion. Where did it go? I'm trying to see if they have a breakdown here.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
see
So like 1
any. I
billion
don't see.
disaster is like, the fact that they raised and spent that money, not necessarily that they're in debt.
I don't see any like Harris administration officials saying that they're in debt. I see.
Well, there is no Harris administration. There never will be.
Right. And all of those people disappeared as soon as the check bounced. Like, the way all of these random small PACs that you have never heard of, because they did not exist before this election, they were on all of social medias. I saw all of their billboards throughout Detroit, and they're gone now. They don't exist.
Okay, so the New Republic article, I'm skimming through it. It does not have an actual breakdown. What it does give is a good metric. The campaign spent an average of $7.5 million a day in August, compared to the 2.7 million that Trump spent. In September, the Harris campaign spent 152 million on advertising, more than double the 63 million that Trump shelled out. And unfortunately for Harris, dollars did not translate.
I mean, that's like what I'm saying. I think like in a general election, you might as well burn your money rather than donate it to either campaign. I don't think what they're doing fundamentally matters. Like, I mean, we could talk about the fact that, yeah, she mismanaged things, that the celebrity Cheney strategy wasn't worth it. But I mean, they had a bigger ground game. They had a much better ground game. They were connected with more voters, yet somehow that translated into nothing.
And they'll never accept responsibility for that failure. I think they're all like the thing I wanted to get into is before the final tally was even declared, they were already getting ready to scapegoat. And it was the same list we were already expecting. Minorities, the left, insufficient anti-genocide. Basically, it's like, in addition to just running a dog shit campaign, it was also this bizarre, like, and we've talked about this on the show several times at this point, this idea that you owe fealty to the Democratic Party, regardless of whether or not you receive something for it. That is not even how things work in feudalism, let alone in a bourgeois democracy.
Well, like, where is my land? Where's my sheep?
Where are the holidays we get from the church? Like, what the...
And I fundamentally think that like the only path forward, like viably, I think, because I mean, like, here's my prediction. In general for like, the next I don't know, 40 years. And here's the thing is that under this prediction, Democrats don't need to learn anything, unfortunately. But it's that Trump will crash the economy with tariffs, deportations, the whole litany of things he's going to do. Then, as punishment and the fact that he can't run and he's kind of uniquely popular, Democrats will win. Democrats will, just like under Joe Biden, perform a recovery that is less than perfect, to put it mildly. They will be punished. They will lose election. Republicans will not improve things. They will lose election, and then so on and so forth. And every 4 years, we just keep blowing up the country. we're just stuck in this vicious cycle of and again, sort of completely undermining any value that incrementalism has when we take, one step forward and 20 steps back every 8 years. The step forward every 4 years and the 20 steps back every 4 years. So like that's my, kind of grim prediction. The only way I think to viably change that is kind of connected to what you were saying, owe fealty for and rewards for stuff. This is how you solve collective action problems. This is how interest groups work, right? The people in those groups get benefits that other people do not. And I think that's like the only viable path forward. I think from a leftist organizing perspective, it's the only viable path forward as well. I've seen people, again, kind of, I see it as kind of, conciliatory as well, where it's like, oh, if you're a Trumper who, is like doing hard and whatnot, I will organize on your behalf and stuff like that. It's like, don't. Those people, like, if they're struggling, focus on like you and yours and the people who are actively interested in, improving the world around you. Like the whole like attitude of like, I would resuscitate a school shooter mid rampage is, I think, self-destructive. Like fundamentally.
It's a very narcissistic fantasy, I have to say, because it's like there's people who actually rely on you, and the fantasy of like reaching across and like giving a Republican a hug that like cures them. It's like the most diseased version of like Aaron Sorkin drama, where like you berate a conservative and then they're like on your team. And like we know for a fact that's not how any of this works. And to that end as well, like I think it is now high time to stop babying liberals. It is high time to really signal to centrists, moderates, this whole just the enablement of fascism. The people who are ideologically, that's what they do. You don't owe them a goddamn thing. You don't even owe them politeness in some instances. That's kind of how I feel. And I don't talk politics with everybody. I'm not really a confrontational person, but I just don't see the value in being gaslit in the greenhouse anymore.
Well, that reminded me too of one of the strategies they had. They had that George Clooney ad, and I can't remember who did the other one. But they were basically the same thing. The idea that like, oh, you don't like women, you don't have to tell your husband how you voted. Which is very much like trying to cater to like this white woman vote that didn't necessarily turn out for them in the way that they would have hoped. But I'm like fundamentally like listeners, I get that, maybe some of us don't talk about politics with our significant others as much as the others do, but like if you do and like you feel like, oh yeah, like I have to actively lie to my significant other because like clearly there's some repercussions for you voting, quote unquote against their preferences, you should fucking leave.
Yeah, that's a whole different set of issues that are not political,
Like it's not like don't like lie to them like, oh yeah, totally vote for Trump. You should just leave. Like the idea that like, oh, it's immature to, and I'm not saying that necessarily every single person who adopts a single right-wing idea is like entirely irredeemable, but like a lot of them kind of are. And like you cutting them out for like the sake of your own mental health or health, maybe your own life in certain cases, it's totally valid.
I'm gonna add to that and say that we are past the you should possibly think about cutting them off, and it's different when you're in a relationship, like a different relationship where you might have to, it might take harder to leave, longer to leave and things like that. But like, stop going to your racist uncle or like the Thanksgiving that enables your racist uncle. Don't go. Like, stop pretending.
He's there to freeload off your food anyways.
Right, like you just like don't show up. Like there's just been this idea of like, oh well, I don't have to agree with them, so like, but I'm still gonna be around them. Like you being around them makes them think that you agree with them. You having zero like balls for lack of a better word, to get up and be like, you're wrong, and I don't like you, and I don't want to be around you, because you don't have to be around these people. And I get it. Some people have like family situations where you are dependent on your family. Then make everybody uncomfortable. Stop sitting there and letting everybody else be comfortable saying hateful things and having these hateful thoughts while you sit silent and be like, it's okay because I don't think that way. No, it's not okay. You are making them think that this is okay because you won't leave or you won't tell them that they are wrong. You are enabling these people.
Yeah.
And that is why we are in these types of situations.
This is bringing to mind something about the state of the discourse in 2014, like Matt Taibbi style Obama era shit, where it's like it was seen as virtuous to try and step outside your quote unquote bubble. And what that meant was like consuming media, really, from like the opposite party or opposite camp.
Which is dead.
It's completely dead at this point, especially. But also to that end, it's like I don't see value in like talking to somebody who is pot committed to not just like saying no to you at every point, but it's just like they are committed to whatever worldview validates their immediate desires and selfishness rather than sitting in reality. And this also applies to, I think, like a lot of us who were radicalized on the internet and didn't bother picking up a book, you know, like you can't just like ingest podcasts, you can't just like watch YouTube like video essays and not realize, one, that like you're being influenced by the influencers around you, but also that like it has to translate into something, it has to translate into transformative worldview, and you have to really sit and weigh like the consequences of your thoughts and actions. Not that like, you know, just living in your brain is the something virtuous or that, you know, it translates into anything inherently, but like just participating in discourse and like being present. And this is kind of why like I felt it necessary to step away from social media a bit too, where it's just like there is a lot of discussions happening that people feel like they have to participate in that serve no real action other than to just radicalize people to the right. And you see that in like cultural discussions, you see this in social discussions, and especially as, you know, let's really talk about how like the tech sector went kind of with the Democrats to just all in on Trump this time. And that was, again, people have said this before, where it's like Obama had the choice to really regulate several sectors of the economy during his term, chose not to, and the tech sector is one of many hydras that is now difficult to kill as a consequence of that. And as more insane guys like Musk and others, you know, fill the ranks, they're in a narcissistic jerk-off fest with Trump, and the industry is reaping the consequences of that, right?
I'm already seeing people refer to Musk as the co-president. He's been included on secret calls and all that stuff.
Which again, it's like I don't know how to really get into this. Everyone's gotten stupider. As things have tended towards the right, everyone's gotten stupider, and everyone's just like plugged into social media with like no media literacy, no critical thinking, and it's like I'll have people I talk to where it's just like we're chilling, and then like just openly throats Elon Musk's dick in a casual conversation, and I have to sit there and be like, have you even just like bothered looking at a Wikipedia entry? Have you bothered looking at business reporting? And these are, you know, quote unquote college educated people. You get what I'm saying? So it's like even in these demographics, like the it's brilliant to me that like as people get more alienated, somehow their ability to be like self-critical or self-reflective disappears with that. In this culture that like claims to be anti-sheeple, like we've just created like an exceptional class of them at this point. And again, the Democrats have no fucking way to address how they intend to deal with this, nor will they accept their complicitness in letting the tech sector go unfettered, letting it go unregulated. keeping in these fucking geriatric, out of touch members of the legislative branch, who are just unable to deal with that.
Hey, some of those members are considered the most tech savvy, just virtue of the fact that they regulate their own Twitter account. And by regulate, I mean they post the dumbest stuff that you'll ever see in your life. Looking at you, Chuck Grassley.
Oh my fucking god. So in this vein as well, you know, the Democrats have made several overtures towards defending the integrity of elections and democracy, and I will say that it has translated, at least in some local jurisdictions or state jurisdictions, on like expanded voter access and you know, trying to make voting easier. But what we've been seeing pop up online anecdotally, and it's not being reported on as well as I'd like, is the resurgence of various forms of voter intimidation, and just very strange activity at polling places. So this is a story out of Detroit. John, you were telling me about this, and I think it just bears repeating. And this happened almost like verbatim in Houston as well, where people at a certain, I can't remember if it was they were at a certain polling place or was just Detroit residents who were getting like racist texts shortly after Trump's victory, or there were bomb threats being called on polling locations, primarily ones that were expected to turn out for the Democrats in Georgia. Just like, again, pockets of these incidences that's like the Democrats should really like, again, if they had any of the motivation of the Trump people to hold up the judiciary process and to do it for any actual attempt to defend democracy, right? They would be like trying to get this shit raised immediately. And I think they've just gone all in on very embarrassingly getting ready to concede the election, because ever since Reagan, the Democrats have been just whipped into shape about, you know, the Republicans will scold them and then they will just do that behavior while the Republicans can go get away with do as I say, not as I do, right? And to the point that it's kind of like the eldest child who like bought their parents' bullshit, where it's like they just turn into the person who does the scolding of everyone on without the parent even being there. And everyone else being like, why the fuck do you have a stick up your ass? I know I just went vulgar and like really informal in the middle of that sentence, but that's how I'm looking at this. And I don't know why they can't address any of this with the seriousness it deserves.
Well, it's because they don't care about voter suppression, and they never have. And if they did, they would care about voter suppression before an election. So, like, why would they go out and be like, oh, maybe there's something fishy with all of this, especially with a person who did January 6th? But no, they don't care about voter suppression. They don't care about voters' rights. They care about people voting for them, which is
frankly,
stupid.
and frankly too, I mean, if that is their attitude, I'm not like going to say that it isn't. They should, you know, maybe consider participating in voter suppression. Like I know how that sounds like but you know what I mean? Like, I mean, fundamentally, like,
I guess they kind of are, because you're not
but not in a
ensuring that,
constructive way.
yeah, not really.
Like, I mean,
but you're stupid enough to like not try to stop like people who have been convicted of a crime not being able to vote in certain situations, or all of this. You would have there be automatic. You wouldn't have to register to vote. You would just automatically be registered when you turned 18. They're doing voter suppression themselves because they don't care.
Well, I mean, there is that policy failure on their, you know, lack of imagination, but it's. I think I was speaking more specifically about stuff happening on election night, and even just any.
Yes,
Yeah,
but I'm saying that the reason the stuff happened on election night is because they don't care about voter suppression.
mm-hmm.
And they don't
For-
see that the reason why they don't get the vote sometimes is because voters are being suppressed, and they don't want to help those voters. because some of those voters might vote for Trump, so might as well just not help.
But like, that's what I'm saying is like in some cases of that, like just frankly, just do what the right does, right? Like take I mean, like, think about like where they close polling places. Instead of having, one polling place in a city, you have a few, and you don't have any in rural areas, right? Like, if people don't want to, participate in civilization more broadly, like do so. And I'm not necessarily openly advocating for that, but like that's like the thing is like I think if they're not going to get serious about, protecting voter rights, then they need to play the suppression game better, I guess.
No,
That's where I'm
well,
going with
the
this.
problem with the Democrats is they take all the wrong lessons from the Republicans. They want to be the Republicans, but they don't want to get their hands too dirty. So, like, I can't do the outright voter suppression. I can't do all of this, like, outright, like, no abortion. I'll say that I will fight for it if I get elected.
Well, I think here's the thing we're dancing around to, and I think John's really going to get excited when I say this, is that the Democratic Party's only purpose at this point is to discipline anything to the left of it. That's really what this comes down to at the end of
Facts.
the day. That's because you think about like all the effort that was applied, and again, Bernie Sanders has been a massive disappointment, so I'm not crying about it, but just the sheer effort that was applied at a media level, in like how the Democratic primaries were administered, up until what could not be called fraud, but could in any other context be seen as suspicious, being levied to shut down the Sanders campaign. And even this time around with Biden's, I mean, again, just going full like death of Stalin level suppression of information with like Biden's own state of mind, state of being, and Biden's own inability to step down, and the party itself keeping secrets about his fitness for office. And just the real slander to the uncommitted movement, which was working well within the paradigm of the Democratic primary to express its goals. And more broadly, I just want it to be said that like a lot of people did suck in their pride and hit the button for Kamala. No deference will be given to them, but they will be seen as unilaterally, by some Democratic pundits as the cause of this loss. When I think, Josh, you've expressed this before, and I think like even the numbers as they come out kind of express this. The Gaza crowd cannot even be meaningfully be blamed for this loss. The numbers aren't there to even prove that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are still going to point at Dearborn, and I mean, I am surprised that Dearborn like went for Trump. Like, I mean, like,
But
like,
not by very
Stein,
much if you think about it.
Well, quite a bit when you consider that Stein was number 2.
I guess.
But like, I mean, like, it's a shame that like, and I think to me though that kind of shows like the failure of organization on that issue as a whole, because like, I mean, at least had like Stein won there, you can make a more credible case that like this should be shifted, because the other problem too is that if you look at the Muslim vote in Michigan from 18 to 22, you've already where Gaza wasn't, I mean, it's always an issue, right? It's it's not like, I mean, things have gotten radically worse since October 7th, but like let's not pretend they were
right,
sunshine and rainbows before that. But it was not a salient campaign issue at that point, and yet you saw a shift away from Democrats there. And I think some of this is with that group is sort of a reversion to the like pre 9/11 mean, where like the social conservatism is sort of kind of taking root again. And I think that, maybe, I mean, and to those people, right, I think those people don't necessarily care about Gaza, but I think that the issues we have with that issue, and like I'm not like I don't want to get in on like the blaming of like yes, it's like the left wing organizers or whatever, but like I do really want a lot of people in those groups to kind of really like give a serious thought to like, what your theory of change is and whatnot. Like I think at this point, like, I mean, to the extent it was ever useful, like just, posting on social media and whatnot about this and it isn't accomplishing anything. I'm not necessarily sure the college campus protests. I mean, in a few places they accomplish things, but I think that we really just need to broadly organize better and more wisely on like everything. This issue is just one of them.
Yeah. No, that seems very uncontroversial to me, at least.
I mean, also, like, I do want to point out that, like, progressive voices that have been, like, very pro-Palestine, very anti-Zionism, they've done pretty well, right? Like, Rashida Tlaib did pretty good in her elections, AOC,
That's
Ilhan
true.
Omar.
Excellent in her election.
Right.
Rashida
and
killed.
and like and I think she's kind of a special circumstance with it, right? Because like that is her community, like already. Like so, I think like I want to be optimistic about that outcome, but I also kind of wonder if that's like sort of a broader factor of who she is and who her voter block already is.
I mean, to be honest, the difference between a lot of these people and someone like Rashida isn't just like that she's progressive or whatever. It's she's actually in the community. She's actually
Right.
doing stuff. And like even for all of AOC's faults, that's what people say about AOC as well. It's like even with all of the bullshit, she be doing the shit that she said she's gonna do for her community. And that's why people stand so hard behind Rashida, because she is always giving things to local community, the people who are actually on the ground helping people. And the Democrats don't care about those people. They don't care about community organizers, whether they are Democratic or not, whether they are left or not. They don't care about the people who are actually helping people in the community because they don't care about community.
Well, I mean, and I think that comes back to our repeat criticism of the Democratic Party as like what is basically a fundraising apparatus and a series of elected officials who are independent contractors, more or less, right? So you do have like Ilhan Omar's and like Rashida Tlaib's that like have built some kind of coherent and solid form of community organizing, and that's why they have like a solid base of support. Like just with like speaking on Rashida Tlaib, right? Like so many community orgs can point to like a picture of like Rashida giving them a giant check for whatever project they're working on, right? And constituency services has always been that kind of thing. But then take a look at like her foil in someone like Richie Torres, who's like representing like one of the poorest areas in the Bronx, and his whole shtick is being like the representative from Tel Aviv. Just like Scrooge McDuck jumping into like a cache of APAC money as his whole career, right? Like that's just what the Democratic Party is at this point. And I again, like whether people take the idea of like it's time to do a clean break with the Democrats, or whether people think that there is some merit to like carving out and isolating these niches within the Democratic Party for the left to use for itself. It's what Josh is saying, right? Is like you really need to sit and grapple with the effectiveness of that. Just getting someone into office is not enough. I can speak very honestly about someone who had been on a couple episodes of this show, whose whole fucking approach to politics was, I liked all the Democratic Party stuff on Facebook, and I put my name down as a candidate. Where are my votes? No, I'm not talking about Sri Tanadar. However, that's that's a lot of people who put their D on the name.
I would love to have Sri on the show. I need to ask him about his wig. It like he has way too much money to having this bad of a wig, especially being a representative of Detroit. Like, girl, you can go down the road You can throw a rock and get a good wig in Detroit. Like, what is happening? The Democrats do not have it together.
I agree. I think that ultimately, like Josh, what you were saying about Rashida Tlaib being drastically different just because her community is behind her. I think that's really what made or broke this election, right? The Republicans,
Yeah.
they're able to rile up their constituency to get people out and moving, and the Democrats just aren't. I think that having a more progressive stance on a lot of issues is a great way to appeal to more people, which is kind of always been my stance, right? Like I think that Democrats should always make concessions to the left or to progressives. Not that I'm picking a side or anything, haha, hee hee, but I think that base building should have been happening, and it's just not. Like they're not.
Well,
There's no.
it's
I
even
feel like
more embarrassing because, like, if you look at Obama era organizing, like OFA was among the most powerful organizational structures the Democrats ever had, and to just piss it away by 2012,
right.
even if you just like cynically use that organizing apparatus to do the Democratic Party's bidding, would have still done something useful, and they just pissed that away, right? Lost it to the ether. People either get disengaged, or people invariably shift right, as has happened, right? I still think that the Democrats have no one else to blame but themselves, and they've basically said for the past 2 cycles now, we do not need the left. You guys can take your ball and go home, unless they're in trouble and they need the left to go like be bodies in a space, and go do shit for them. They can demand that the left go fight the right on the picket line. But then when it comes to any meaningful concessions, and even we've talked about how like the Biden administration couldn't even advertise any of their wins or any of their positives as positives. Just dropped. It's just absurd that like the left is both like a tool for them as well as something that can like be beaten and broken at any point. It should
Yeah.
it
No.
should it should materialize spontaneously when they need something to happen, and also just go back and disappear when like they don't need it.
No.
Exactly.
You're exactly right. I think it's really interesting also how much. Not just with like Latino voters and young voters, but it's also interesting to look at how much they lost in terms of like unions. Like there's a lot of like labor unions, etc., that are just not openly endorsing Kamala. That are like, I know UAW endorsed a ton of like Democratic candidates, but like there's like tons of actual on the ground union members are not feeling the Democratic Party, just because, even though Joe Biden was quote unquote the most pro union president, and Kamala is essentially an extension of that campaign.
But
Yeah.
that's where I go back to, like, what was her policies? She didn't have any policies. She had things that she talked about, but she didn't have like, I'm going to ensure that unions get strong because I'm going to do this. Like, she
Well, I
didn't
mean,
have.
let's maybe just clarify. She didn't have a platform, period. And I
Yeah.
think like to that end too, like I'm kind of sympathetic to where you're coming from, because the Democratic Party itself has no consistent language or even ability to talk about any of this consistently. Like, something that me and Josh were talking about, he had to drop, was, that the Pod Save America podcast, which is like the liberal Chapo Trap House, basically. I don't know how else to say it. Like, they were sitting on information that like Biden was at risk of losing, Kamal was at risk of losing, and they it's not until like their election breakdown comes out that they have to admit any of that, right?
I mean, so many people are doing that. Like Vanity Fair went and said stuff. Like all of these news
so you
media.
all knew, like, and I think
it was
that's
like either they were on a gag order or they just decided like that is the way we are going to win, is by actively lying to the constituents. Like what?
Well, and but to that end too, like the Pod Save guys, like they had this very stupid statement that tells me everything, which is like, we have a messaging issue. We don't have a story to tell. And I think it speaks like whether whether you use the word policies, platform, or whatever it is, they cannot articulate anything other than this fantasy of, hey, Bernie Sanders and Dick Cheney agree on this thing being so universally bad. You have to come out. It's a logical fallacy not to come. And it's like, not everyone thinks like that for a variety of reasons. But it doesn't signal anything. To them, politics is not about like, how do you even like, in a cynical sense, how do you control popular anger? It's like, how do you make the most logical choice possible? How do you get the answer right on a multiple choice survey? They literally see the ballot as a Scantron. I don't know how else to say it.
It's crazy because like so many voters, especially in this election, were just angry, right? And they have every right to be angry because of the economy, because of how everything is. I feel like Democrats just need to weaponize that anger, but they're just not doing that. They're not
especially
running
when
on.
you don't like weaponize it, you just open the door for someone else. So they've been very effective in ensuring that the left, in whatever limited, mutated form it exists right now, cannot ever harness any of that. But also, they've just opened the door for the right to take it and run with it as far as they can. To the point now that it's like the anger is out of control, the rhetoric is out of control, and what the right wants to do with that anger is it's simply evil and inhumane. I don't know how else to say it, right? And like that is a concrete and manifest failure of the Democratic Party and its campaign strategy, as well as its overall approach to elections and politics.
Well, my thing is like, how can you really weaponize anger when the anger right now is to the Democrats? Like, the Democrats are in control right now. Like, how are you like, oh, I'm so angry at the economy. Nigga, do something about it then. Like,
no, but
Joe Biden has spent this last 4 years tweeting like he's not the person who is in charge, who can do the thing.
Well, I mean, that's the whole point of like the idea of supporting Kamala to jump in and like tag in after Biden steps down. It was to give Kamala this space where if she had the instinct she claimed to have, or that the press was claiming she had, to jump in and say, okay, now that someone sane is in the room, we're not doing any of that shit. And that could have been like an easy sweep.
And like, I feel like it would have been so easy for Kamala to like Sky, what you were saying about like weaponizing the anger against the Democrats. It would be so easy for her if they picked her as the runner up, and she immediately goes, "Okay, guys, we're gonna do some different shit now. Biden's not it," and like moved away from Biden. But instead, she kind of walked directly in his footsteps and was proud about it, even though he literally had to step down because he was a senile old man, right?
Which is the other thing. Like, it was all a defense of Biden's legacy that he didn't even fucking deserve. Let's be honest.
Right. Yeah. And one of the best like political ads I saw was anti-Harris, and it showed a clip of her being like, I agree with everything Biden has done. What do you mean you agree with everything?
What did he do?
You shouldn't be agreeing with everything. You should be like, I stand behind my president. You do the Democratic thing. You do the thing you're supposed to do when you are a part of a party. You stand behind the person who is in charge, but you have your own ways you would go about it. She was like, nah, I was there at every single policy meeting. I was up in there. I agree. I did that. And we're like, that's not how you should really be explaining this. We don't want you to say that you are doing the bad thing that we don't like right now. And she didn't get that. Nobody from her camp got that.
So, how are AKAs going to respond? Are the AKAs going to execute Kamala for her failure? What's happening?
No, all of those people are like He did a flawless campaign.
Oh, that's been maddening. That's been really
I
maddening.
don't think y'all know what the word flawless means. I think we need to open up a dictionary or a thesaurus because this is not what flawless. Also, a flawless campaign would not have been only 4 months old. A flawless campaign would mean that you had said in 2022 that you were going to be running for president, or 2023, or early 2024 that
Yeah,
you were running for president.
but it still doesn't matter about like the 4 month thing. Like I don't buy that excuse either because it's like you're the vice president. This was always on the table to happen. You know,
Right,
you
'cause you have
raised
always
all
been
that money in
running-
one night. You raised $1 billion in one night. So like you don't even have the excuse to be like the fundraising took time. And you had the entire DNC apparatus and all of the financial and political resources that entails. It is
Plus,
your lack of imagination.
She was actively on the ballot, so like she was running for a re-election no matter what. She was
Exactly.
running to have another job for the next 4 years.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Is like the 4 month thing doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, but like it does. It's like they lost so many people being the fact that everybody knew that fucking Joe Biden is senile and everybody was just pretending like it didn't happen. So you lost people there. You lost all those actual moderates back then. You can't gain those people back just because you give somebody else from that actual presidency.
But it's also interesting too
spot.
because like polls to me are kind of I don't know. I don't put a lot of faith in polls these days. But
people are liars. People are trolls.
Probably, but to that end too, like how do you blow such a massive lead where anyone other than Joe Biden was like the most popular option on whatever poll it was?
While Joe Biden's at his most unpopular too.
Right. If you have this invisible or ghost mandate to like come in and put Joe out of his misery, quote unquote, how do you blow it? How do you blow it that fucking bad? And it just comes down to this lack of imagination. It comes down to this inability to articulate a politics where anything is promised. And I think, like, you know, the old standard of the Democrats don't promise anything because it would mean they would have to actually do something, I think is closer to a truism than anything's ever been. They were able to really discipline the left, especially like when Kamala was facing her first, you know, bouts of resistance from the uncommitted movement and any solidarity from Gaza. You know, she gives the lip service, and then immediately after doing so, she's like, "Excuse me, I'm talking. Excuse me, we gave you the lip service. We're done."
And that was in Michigan.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, that's what I'm saying. Is like you still continued like the most backwards policies of the Biden administration, or just I don't even know if policy is the right word, but just the most like backwards assumptions of Biden governance, where it's like we're all in on Ukraine, we're all in on Israel, we're all in on giving lip service to climate but doing nothing about it. We're all in on this bizarro economic control that doesn't really help anybody, and it blows up in your fucking face to the point that like Netanyahu is over here congratulating Trump because he got the result he fucking wanted. You know?
Yeah, I was gonna really say before you even said that, like at the end of the day, Israel won.
Israel
Yeah.
is the
real
biggest winner
winner.
of the 2024 presidential election.
Freaking winner. And like if I'm not gonna be surprised if they say if we find out that they did helped with some voter suppression as well. But like at the end of the day, they were gonna win no matter what. But I think they win a little bit more with Trump.
I mean, what do you think of like
suffer.
What do you think of the joke that like Hillary Clinton was also a big winner because she's finally not like the biggest loser to Trump?
I think she still is the biggest loser to Trump. She blew a 8-year lead that the Democrats had.
You know how funny it would be because like just like for brownie points, if Kamala was like, I am not letting Hillary Clinton advise us. Like the fact that there's reports that like the UK Labour Party gave Kamala advice.
Ooh, what the fuck are you listening to them
The
motherfuckers?
UK Labour Party is crazy.
Right,
Like,
it's just like
bro.
all these centrist like losers keep coming in to be like, and this is how you win this one, and then like it blows up. Oh, I sure wonder how that happened. And it's like,
I wonder how that happened indeed.
well, I mean, and here's the thing: is like I do believe in blaming the voters. I do believe that like the Democratic Party did not have a plan to confront racist tendencies and sexist tendencies among the electorate. It just simply did not. However,
Well, that means you will have to do that in general. Like you'll have to
yes,
actually stand against racism and sexism
you
and
would have to have a program
homophobia
to
and
deal with it.
transphobia. Like you can't even pretend that you are, because even if they did try to do lip service for those groups, why would I believe you? Why would I believe you after all this time? Why would I believe that now you're actually going to do what you say you're going to do?
It's to that end, right? Where it's like, for the liberal establishment's like hatred of Cuba, right? Um, I look at like how the recent passage of defenses for gay rights and gay marriage in Cuba, and like how to the point that like Cuban legality was rewritten to like come up with a new conception of how we define family in that context, right? That doesn't that and this is also just another stupid thing about like especially like gay like LGBT people in the democratic fold who are convinced that capitalism is how you get gay rights and no other way, not civil disobedience, not organizing, not like really putting up a fight. It's getting to vote for it. When the Democrats magically put it on the ballot, that's when you get rights. That's how a lot of these people think. I'm not just LGBT like people. A lot of people who are just bought into the Democratic Party's view of the world just think the minute it's on the ballot, you get rights. Like it never fucking works like that. But
Especially when you think about like some of these places in Florida where like things like abortion were on the ballot, but it wasn't you win by a majority, you have to win by 60%. And a lot
right.
of those ballots were like at 56%, 58%. What happens when you're on the ballot? But guess what? It's rigged no matter what.
But also like what just to follow up on that earlier thread, like the way this passed in Cuba was like it took many years, many hard fights for organizers to like convince people and persuade people about this. And like, facing homophobia from the people they were arguing it, like all this stuff, right? Where it's like to actually put up that effort and to actually like do the work of like not just persuading people who haven't made their mind on it, but then fighting racism, sexism, homophobia. Like the Democratic Party used to at least pay lip service to that. It's full, not even committed to resisting bigotry anymore. It's enabled bigotry at this point, especially with like this rightward shift on foreign policy and this rightward shift on immigration. It's one that completely obscures the United States' policy failures internationally. It's one that completely obscures the Democratic Party's, failures to fight the right wing in America for the past 4 years, if not longer than that. And I just don't know how else to convey like the severe anger I have, not just at liberals, but at all the fucking Johnny come latelys who are just now realizing the implications of this shit. That's who my anger is really fucking directed at. It's all these people who said we don't need to listen to the left for 8, 20, however many years they were doing it. And now they're sitting there with, their head in their hands like, oh my God, how did this happen? You fucking did it. You fucking made your bed.
Exactly.
And if
And you
that's
made
what
all of our rest of our bets with it.
right. And there are some people who were powerless. You know what I'm saying? There are some people who like they just in this social media milieu that favor the Democrats, and now they're genuinely like worried about like people that they are vulnerable to this. They might know people who are vulnerable. you got to make that choice of like, hey, I got to join the left organization or I got to do something, right? That how you do that in your community, in your space, that's for you to determine. But for the people in charge and the people who had influence, the donors, the apparatchiks, all of you lot,
Oi.
I hope your fucking hell is fucking commiserating on this for the rest of your life.
My biggest, and this is controversial, sorry a little bit, is that I'm happy that the Democrats lost because it would have been so horrible for them to, especially when probably by a small margin, and then them to just pretend like they did not do some of the stupidest things you could do. Like Kamala saying that she's going to put Republicans on her cabinet if she won. Like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Well, what good Republican do you know? What smart, savvy Republican that is just so much better than anybody on your team, anybody that you could find, anyone that you could bring up from nowhere and put on your cabinet? You want a Republican? You want to? I'm so happy that we don't have to
It's
see
even worse
her
than
do
that.
that like bullshit.
It's even worse that their lack of imagination literally was like, let's resurrect neocons. Let's resurrect like the darkest instincts of like Bush Jr. as a counterweight to
Right.
Trump. Which is like, I'm sorry, like that is the thing that made Trump.
I mean, at least Bush Jr. like put his niggas on. Like, dang, at least we all eating, we getting money. Who's getting money in her situation? Other than those celebrities. Like, who's in the long term? Who's her oil company that's getting their kickbacks?
More
No
than that too,
one?
it's like
Did you do this for nothing?
I'm also just worried about like what this means for state Democrats, right? Because the big trend in the past 4 years is like, and this is something that you can point to as like another of Biden's issues, where it's like Biden left a lot of state parties and like state governors in the Democratic Party out to hang, and that's where like people like Whitmer, Waltz, who's the huge dude in Illinois, Pritzker, right? Where it's like they just kind of like freewheel it and say fuck it, okay, we're just gonna do what we want, and at least make like lip service appeals to like progressive populism and stuff, right? And like that has been hamstrung because of like the down ballot implications, not universally, but like someone who was like a big Biden surrogate like Whitmer, for example, who had some kind of progressive agenda in its limited form in Michigan, right, is going to be hamstrung by the effects of this. And I think her calculation to go all in behind Biden really backfired for her in this case. I can't comment on all the different implications for other Democratic state governors. Like right now, people are thirsting over Gavin Newsom, like he gonna do something. Well, let's wait and see. But
Gavin Newsom he is the only Democrat who is playing in this game. And I'm not complimenting him because he is an evil piece of fucking shit who destroys homeless camps and thinks that is fucking fun and funny, but then gets on national television and try to slam on Ron DeSantis because I'm cool like that. Like, no, he's a freaking psychopath. And
to be fair, he did give Ron DeSantis like a tongue lashing, but like anyone could have done that. Anyone could give him a tongue lashing.
With a half of a brain knows that Ron DeSantis is a fucking stupid, horrible person who, like, ever since that campaign, he hasn't been making as much noise. I'm not gonna say he doesn't make no noise, but like, you see how that Disney stuff got squashed real fast.
Meanwhile, California can't even outlaw slavery, so it's like,
oh, and Newsom's quiet about that shit. Like again, California has been on a real
slavery. You need slavery. That's how California runs, baby.
I mean, I make a lot of jokes about like California brand fascism, and like it's like the most like explicit variety of like it's topically and surface level liberal, but like underneath it are these very bizarre reactionary and misanthropic instincts, you know? And I
I'm a,
just go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna. I'm agreeing with you and just being like, yeah, Ronald Reagan. That's all you have to say about that. That's literally
No,
like
Nixon,
Ronald.
Nixon.
Oh my God, double homicide. Like my God, California might be the evilest of them all. And like we know that California did turn out blue, and of course it was, but it was. If you look at the map, it was real red. It was looking real red. It's looking very red. Those ain't cute little libs out there.
You know, Isabel Wilkerson still had nothing to say about the fact that California also couldn't prevent discrimination on caste grounds. Just saying.
Right. We ain't gonna talk
Past
about her.
grounds? What?
Yeah, they passed I don't know how far it got, but there was like a bill about like California should ban discrimination on caste. If there is caste-based discrimination, you can apply the anti-discriminatory legal statutes against that and have a case that hey, you were being discriminated against. And for whatever reason, I think Newsom vetoed it, if I'm not mistaken.
Because, like, girl.
Let me just fact check myself real quick. Hold up. Tax discrimination, California. Yeah, California, October 9th. So 2 days after October 7th, in the state of California, Gavin Newsom vetoed a bill that would have explicitly banned caste discrimination in the state.
My nigga said, "Nah, let them discriminate via caste. I don't care."
No, it's even funnier because Newsom said the measure was unnecessary because it is already prohibited in the state. And like he basically was like saying no, the liberal definition, which is like sex, race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, disability, gender identity, sexual orientation, and other characteristics. Well, I'm just saying, like, if you have Bay Area Indians doing like bringing back casteism, a couple ordinances don't hurt. You know what I'm saying? It just
right. Like, if they just trying to bring back, like, if you
they didn't want to piss off Moldy or
just
something. I
trying to
don't
bring
know.
back Jim Crow, like, even if you're like, oh, it doesn't count because we don't do anti-racial discrimination, I would still be like, hell no, no Jim Crow. Like,
Right.
I'm anti-Jim Crow.
Such a controversial stance, guy.
I'm so sorry.
Damn,
Canceled.
you can't even. I mean, I don't know because the Democrats were like Trump is racist. Anyways, here's our thoughts on immigrants.
Yeah, literally.
Yes.
Trump is racist. Anyways, here's our thoughts on Palestinians and Arabs broadly. Like, what the fuck?
Oh my god! I want to.
Let's not even get into it because, like, okay, now that I have the blacks on the podcast, I have a couple. We gonna get into black politics discussion real quick. What do you make of this? Like, just the way that like black people have been, not only like black women have been like mammified for the Democrats at this point, but then also just the bizarre like turn on black men. Because I don't think black conservatism is growing. It's more vocal, but like there was just that weird push to like just preemptively like point to the trend of like more vocal black conservatism as like if we lost it's because of that. And then even the tactic to get, black male voters back on the board was also just kind of like really weird and dismissive. But then also on that edge, you have this in the way that they were looking for scapegoats, and the way that the defense of Israel's policy on Gaza was kind of executed. You had this bizarre cropping up of like separatism for black people as like a constituency of the Democratic Party, as like, oh, black people should really like not stand in solidarity with Palestine, or black people should really like, point to immigration as a cause of like, social, like, I don't know where that fucking came from, right? You could argue that the right had a hand in it, but the Democrats fucking let that happen. And it also just points to like the really demeaning and patronizing relationship that Democrats want to have with black voters. I just don't fucking get it.
Oh no, you're 100% correct. I mean, especially with the patronizing, we saw that when Obama came out and essentially just like called all the black men, misogynistic, just because I don't think I forgot the actual numbers, but I think that Harris was like polling lower amongst like black men, and like they literally went out and grabbed Obama and was like, say something right quick, call him all misogynistic, and he did. And it's like that's not how you get people to vote for Harris. That's not how you do that. You do that by, like serving the people, right? You do that by addressing their concerns, and they're just not. They would rather just like wag the finger, call us all misogynistic or whatever, and then just kind of like, expect our votes to just be in for them. And it's not even to say that like misogyny isn't real or anything, but like at the end of the day, it's like you got to reach out to these people, and they're just not.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like you write off whole like contestable segments of the electorate, and then get surprised that you lost.
Literally,
But
yeah.
You
the
literally
thing
wrote them
is-
off. Like what?
But no, listen, she didn't lose black people.
That's also
Black
true.
people,
That's also
black
true.
people voted for her. Black people, out of every group of people, black women number one, black men number two, and then everybody else. Like black people voted for Harris because a lot of us grew up on that vote blue no matter who. I'm
Yep.
supporting everybody who's black, which I will say I'm not. Fuck you. If you are trash, then you are trash, and I'm not supporting you. But black people voted for her. I don't like that. The fact that they did chastise anyone was insane. Like anyone who was black, but like we didn't vote for Trump. Like
If they should have chastised
some-
anyone, it should be Indians.
bro, because y'all saw that all other
I'm talking
races,
South Asians, not even. I'm talking South Asians.
but
Specifically.
no. And the thing is some people are chastising Native Americans because
Oh my god!
but listen. Native Americans overwhelmingly voted for Trump. There was only like 29,000 Native Americans that even voted. There were bomb threats on reservations and
Crazy.
so much other voter suppression, which is why I'm like, the Democrats do voter suppression. They by them not caring about voter suppression happening
On the res, like you
places-
should be like talking about that. What the fuck?
right, like so, like literally, majority of the native people who voted for Trump are people who are probably honestly don't see themselves as native. Or maybe they don't even have that much, they aren't actually connected to a tribe. They might just say that they're native and they live their life as a white person.
Well, I mean, I think that's the thing that gets lost because like the Democrats just don't have the language at this point to talk about identity anymore. I think especially for like leftists of color, we should especially co-opt and reclaim all discussion about identity, especially as it pertains to class, capitalism, and colonialism, right? That should be like if you prioritize anything as a person of color on the left, like I'd say that's just an easy like one. The Democrats failed. We can take it and recuperate it for ourselves. But also like, I think it's just that thing I was trying to say at the start of the episode where it's like the Trump movement has stolen a lot of otherwise progressive or otherwise radical elements. As people have also gotten kind of dumber, kind of more ideologized, and as the culture has gotten more right wing and anti-intellectual, it's been able to push people towards it. And I don't think, the conventional liberal circles have an answer to that. But it has to be reckoned with. You got to sit with some of this shit and be like, yeah, damn, that fucking happened. We have to strategize and we have to fucking come to grips with what to do with this situation.
Yeah, especially when you can tell that the right is strategizing, right? Like, I'm looking at the numbers right now, and I think Trump won 8% of black voters and 30% or 32% of Latinos in 2020. But this year around, he won 13% of black voters and 45% of Latino voters. So it's like when the Democrats do nothing, the Republicans will make huge gains, and they've been doing nothing.
Yeah. Sky, if you're talking, you're on mute.
I wasn't. I was just thinking about how stupid this is.
No, I mean that's really it. Like I didn't have a plan of attack for this particular one. I just figured like this is just going to reveal itself naturally. I don't know. I don't know what else to say, right? Other than just like the scapegoating is not panning out mathematically. Like I've been trying to crunch the numbers, and it's like even if you want to point fingers at like particular groups, the ones who you demanded show out for you did.
Yeah.
And
And the
more
thing,
than that, go ahead.
yeah, and I was gonna say you can't even blame like third-party voters either, because if you gave every single third-party voter to Kamala in all the battleground states,
It
she
still
still
wouldn't
would
be
have
enough.
lost. Yeah, she still would have lost.
To that end too, right? Where it's like Trump underperformed by like 2 million votes. So there is attrition there. I don't know like what caused that, but like certainly enough people aren't going to look into that.
Yeah.
And then to that end as well, it's like, I think just again, voter turnout being low, consistently being low, even though Democrats have been trying to it's less of that. It's more of like Democrats kind of just outsource voter engagement to like civic engagement and like nonprofits to like do that for them. And there's only so much they can do when like nothing's being promised,
Yeah, I do feel like this issue is almost entirely ideological, right? Like it's just where they chosen to stand and draw the line, and it's just so fucking goofy that they spent so much time playing tug of war with progressives and like just trying to drag us further and further right, and then still losing. They made all those concessions and still lost.
That's the thing. Like, I don't know if it's because they lose energy fighting the left. I don't believe that. But like when it comes to like the competence and like professionalism of the Democratic Party, it is in suppressing the left. It is in demonizing any resistance, right? To the status quo that comes from the left. But the minute, even to do like layups against the Republicans, just taking the easiest fucking like shots at them, they just like will just Looney Tunes trip on a banana and like fall in a Rube Goldberg device. I don't. That's what we're up against. That's what we're fucking dealing with. And the Johnny come latelys who are just realizing this, look at yourselves. How did it take you this long? What were you telling yourself? What did you believe? What were you trying to hide from yourself? Or what people were you trying to impress in ignoring all of that? What did you gain from that? Nothing. So maybe do something that gets you something at the end of the day, instead of, I don't know, being gaslit in the greenhouse.
Being gaslit in the greenhouse. The only way to stop fascist ideology is anti-fascist ideology.
Exactly. And liberals don't even cater to that anymore. So
Nope.
So what can they offer us? I don't know.
Fascism. That's all they can.
I mean,
Right-wing neoliberalism and fascism.
oh my god. So we've been at this for what has now been, I guess, an hour and 40-ish minutes. I'm really not sure what else to say. I feel like we really ran the gamut. I think we hit everything comprehensively as per greenhouse mindset. But is there anything that we missed to talk about, or is there any like pressing take or just something you want to leave the audience with before we start to close this out?
I guess my call to action is to find your local leftist organization.
Yep.
Even if you don't entirely agree across every single ideological, point and framework or whatever, join them, advance their cause, because we're gonna need them essentially.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Sky.
Also, be more connected with your local communities. Even your local people need you more than all of these other stupid politicians who do not care about you and don't even care about winning your vote. So if you are someone who's ever donated to a presidential campaign, I suggest any money you donated to that, you donate to your actual community. Cancel out that bad juju that you already had, and then actually connect with your community. Some of the things that people have been suggesting is make sure that you have a library card and that you're actually taking advantage of the resources at your library. Um, Maybe think about getting into local politics, but I'm not going to tell you to be like an actual politician because as soon as you got that title, you become evil. I'm so sorry.
True.
It's you literally move over and you have to physically fight against that evilness every single day that you are a politician.
Power
Um,
corrupts.
you cannot, because that's exactly what happened to Bernie. Is like he stopped fighting for 1 second and it started to get at him. Once you let someone tell you what to do as a politician that goes against your values, you are forever corrupt. So don't become that person if you do become a politician, but connect with your community because your community is who needs you, not politicians.
You know, something, this isn't my joke per se, but what I love repeating sometimes is that since 2020, Bernie has had an open invitation to the DNC cuck chair and does nothing but sit in it. Which is very unfortunate because the reality of what it's felt like to be on the left and feeling like you are obligated or you have to be conciliatory with established liberal politics, whether it's the Democratic Party or something adjacent to it, is kind of being a hostage. It is, not speaking your mind. It is not, being your best self or expressing the full perspective you have, because you are being, held against your will at gunpoint. And Bernie, if you're listening, if a Bernie staffer is listening to this, you got to get up in stage and start crying and being like, listen, they had me at gunpoint, dog. I had to say that shit. That's the only way you save your career at this point.
Yeah, kind of.
But like, to that end, I think the only advice I have, in addition to what I've always been saying, which is, really pick up a fucking book, deepen your thought, deepen your perspective, really study some of this stuff. Like, if you come from this leftist, particularly Marxist persuasion, you owe it to yourself to really examine and critique and know how a lot of these levers of power, how these economic structures, these social structures, these political structures play out, not just in general, but against you, And you don't do that by just scrolling your social media feed and taking convenient things. I think the only advice I have, and this is the advice I should be taking most heavily, more than anyone else listening, is to reject convenience in whatever form that takes. I'm not saying you should fetishize doing the hard thing, but I really think that you should be critical of things that are presented to you on a silver platter. You should be skeptical of easy answers. You should be skeptical of simple sloganeering. You should be skeptical of people who think they have all the answers to everything. And you're going to see a lot of grifting in the coming days, as there are real fucking, people who are vulnerable and at risk to a Trump administration, right? Don't fucking fall for the grifts. Don't fucking fall for easy answers. Don't take liberals at their word, particularly when they've proven at this point they can't do anything. So what you do with that, how you go about it, and how that plays out in your life is really going to be up to you. But it's on you to do it consistently, and do it meaningfully. And that applies to me just as much as anyone else. I don't know how else to say it.
I have one more thing to say, and Audie's probably gonna get mad at me. Um, but I want y'all to know, if there is an election in 4 years and the empire has not fell, do not vote for Jill Stein. And this, listen,
True. Oh my God,
this is
true.
this is
Oh,
not
no.
because she's stealing votes from the Democrats. No, I'm telling you, as a long-term Jill Stein hater, she is the biggest grifter of them all. She does not care about you. She really just cares about popping out of her hole every 4 years
You care about
and
Gaza
getting
right?
your money and then just lying about every single thing that she cares about because she doesn't care about anybody but herself getting money. She doesn't care about Gaza. Her vice president pick literally got on the mic 2 days before the election and spewed some of the most transphobic shit ever. And it's just like, you guys got scammed. And you're going to continue to get scammed if you think, again, you're going to be served on this silver platter, this perfect candidate that just came out of nowhere. And they seem like they're way better than this person. They seem like that because they're lying. They're lying to you. They're liars. And Jill Stein is about, like, I don't know, have you heard anything that has she said anything since the election? She probably hasn't, because you know what she's going to do? She's going to slither back. She's going to go to her conferences. She's going to talk about democracy. She's going to get her professor salary for being an adjunct or whatever somewhere. And then she's going to come back in 2027 and she's going to be like, you guys should have a different choice. I am the face of the Green Party. Bitch, the Green Party doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist because none of y'all try to make it exist. It is something that exists every 4 years as a money laundering scheme. So
Same with
please,
libertarians. Same with libertarians. Hold up.
yes. Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm not just saying that this is, but specifically for Jill Stein, you stupid, ugly bitch. Stop
Hey,
lying to these
yo,
Stop lying to these
yo.
people who only want hope for their future. Stop getting them at their heartstrings, lying to them, knowing that you are not going to even think about doing anything good. You're not even going to pretend to do the Democrat thing where you actually, like, I'm going to promise you something. No, you're going to go back on your word because you don't have a word. And I want y'all to know that if she comes back, if we have another election as the United States of America and she comes back, she's going to do the exact same thing and you're going to get scammed again. So just stop. Cut out the middleman.
I literally said beware of grifters, and you just.
Yeah,
I agree. Hey, no, Sky's right.
this
It's
is,
right on the money.
that's why I needed to say this, because one of the biggest grifters in this whole campaign was Jill Stein. And if people don't know that she is a grifter, they're going to continue to believe that she can help them. She not only can she not help you, she wouldn't even if she could. Just so you know.
Well, there you have it, folks. I'm gonna have a creative time editing this, although I think this was pretty much very necessary for us to do as a podcast staff, as well as just, all of us on the left, particularly, since no one else is going to grapple with this. It's high time we do, right? So keep the spirit, folks. I don't know what else I got, but I wish everyone the best. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more. Any plugs? Doesn't sound like it. Okay. Well,
Wait, John, do you have any plugs?
I actually do not have any plugs.
Oh, damn. My plug is never believe in Jill Stein.
It's a pretty safe plug.
I'm telling you.
Well,
She's gonna go and she's gonna go on tour and she's gonna cry to everybody and talk about how she put on a good fight. Girl, do not wipe that white woman's tears for her. I promise you, they gonna dry up because they never was there.
Lord. You I mean, listen, I have to edit this because it sounds like we were more pissed about Jill Stein than we were.
No, I mean, the thing is like I had no hope that Kamala actually was going to do anything that she said. And like the people that I saw who didn't support her, or like people, she was bad at her job. She did a bad campaign, but Jill Stein gave people her hope. Jill Stein gave some people the Bernie 2016 hope. And I want y'all to know that she is not the next Bernie. Even with Bernie and all of his like faults and the bullshit that he's been on supporting Israel, Jill Stein is nowhere near what Bernie was in 2016. Because Bernie actually cared for people and Jill Stein cares for Jill Stein.
This has been episode 102. My bad. This has been episode 112 of Greenhouse Gaslighting. Thanks for tuning in, dear listeners, and thanks for our full staff being able to come through on this one. I hate to say that this was a fun one, because the subject, to be honest, really wasn't, but stay tuned, dear listeners. We'll be back with more. As always, we will have our show links in the notes below. Till next time, folks, take care, stay safe, stay out the greenhouse. Take care.
They were privately telling reporters at the time that Kamala Harris couldn't win. So they were shivving Kamala Harris to reporters while they told everyone else, not a time for an open process, and his vice president can't win, so he's the strongest candidate. Then we find out when the Biden campaign becomes the Harris campaign, that the Biden campaign's own internal polling at the time when they were telling us he was the strongest candidate showed that Donald Trump was going to win 400 electoral votes. That's what their own internal polling said. So like, I don't have a lot of,
I don't know what it means by the Obama era playbook. I think